Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolina and today I'm going to show you how to make this gorgeous vest using my new sewing pattern called Penelope. You can buy this pattern from my shop on Etsy or my website, and I'll leave link in the description if you want to check it out. It's a beginner-friendly project and it only takes 1 hour to make. You won't need an overlock with only a sewing machine. I will start by preparing the fabric to cut by ironing the lining. As a main fabric, I'll use this fake fur fabric, which you guys helped me to pick out on my Instagram stories, so thank you so much. I'll start by folding the fabric in half and cutting panel B on the fold. When you cut this fabric, the fluff goes everywhere and my whole sewing room was just completely covered in them. Moving on to the panel A, again I'm gonna fold the fabric in half and cut 2 pieces from my left and right side. Moving on to the lining, cut panel B again on the fold and 2 pieces of the front panels. Don't forget to cut out the pockets. You'll need 4 pieces. It is very important to mark your notches from the pattern. I had the perfect thread for this project. The shade matches perfectly. To start, I have my cut-out pattern pieces in the main fabric, lining fabric, as well as scissors and a matching thread. You can use different type of closures for this project, toggle buttons, or very typical for the vest, hook and eye, or leave it open. And now let's start with the tutorial. Place a pocket between the notches that we marked from the pattern on the left and right piece. Sew them together, and I highly recommend having a lining panel of the fabric on the top to prevent from sliding under the foot of the machine. Sew them together with a 1 cm seam allowance and repeat the same steps on the back panel. Once you stitch the pocket, open the seam and top stitch the pocket as close to the seam as possible. Push the fabric away with your hand. If you're using fur like me, it helps to get really close to the edge. And this is how it's supposed to look like. Press the seam using an iron, but watch out for the iron temperature not to damage the fabric. Place front and back pieces together right side to right side and pin them together on the shoulder. Sew them with a 1 cm seam allowance. I'm gonna trim the lining pieces all around the edges by 0.5 cm. The lining needs to be just slightly smaller. But once we sew the vest together, that seam is going to tuck inside and make the lining the seam invisible on the right side. And I'll repeat the same steps on the other pieces of the front and back panels. Now moving to the lining, pin front and back pieces together on the shoulders and sew them with 1 cm seam allowance. Tuck in the seam allowance inside and press the shoulder seam open. If you have your own label, now is the time to sew it on. Join lining and main fabric together right side to right side, starting from the front panels only around the neckline. Make sure to align shoulder seams first together and sew the edge with a 1 cm seam allowance. Again, make sure that the main fabric is at the bottom and the lining at the top, so you have more control over the stitch line. This is an excellent project if you're new to sewing or you're just a beginner. It's very easy and very quick. It only takes like 1 hour to make. You can use different types of fabrics that would completely change the look. As the next step, I'm gonna open the vest and sew together the shoulder seam only with a 1 cm seam allowance. We can already notice probably a little bit of pulling since the lining is slightly more narrower, so make sure to align the edges on the other side and sew them with a 1 cm seam allowance. Now turn the front pieces to the right side. This technique is so great as you can end up with a very clean finish. Now we are going to match the sides of the vest together. Starting from the side seam where the lining meets the main fabric, start just at the top and continue to pin the side seams together. Once you get to the pocket, continue to pin around it with a 1 cm seam allowance. This is why it's also very important to make sure that those notches are properly marked. If the position of your pockets is different and one pocket is higher than the other, undo that seam and do it again. Otherwise, the whole side seam would just look distorted. I'm going to repeat the same steps on the other side. Make a small back tack stitch where the fabric meets. I'm going to turn my project by 90 degrees and then continue that stitch line. I'm going to lift my foot with the needle still in the fabric to make that corners as smooth as possible. And then once you get to the end of the pocket, continue to stitch. Because the pockets are the first thing that gets used through the time, I'm going to use a double stitch just around the pockets to secure them. And that's your side now. You have beautiful pockets on the side seam, and if you then turn the jacket to the wrong side and press the lining seams inside in place, it's going to look so much better. Be careful again with the temperature of the iron. You don't want to damage the fabric, so keep it very low and use a lot of steam. And that's your vest almost ready. Like I said, it's a very simple project, so it's very beginner friendly that I highly recommend you to try it, especially if you're a beginner. Now I'm gonna turn the vest to the wrong side and sew the hem together. I'm gonna leave a small gap opening approximately 10 cm wide to then turn the vest to the right side. Sew the hemline with a 1 cm seam allowance, then trim the corners and turn the vest to the right side through the gap we just left. And we are almost at the end of the project. Make sure that all the corners are now out and very sharp and neat. And now we just need to stitch the opening using an invisible stitch technique. I really love this technique and it's a very simple way to make the vest super quickly and efficiently. And I decided to add a closures for this vest as I already made one without. I'm gonna add 2 hooks and eyed closures. The first one is going to be 15 centimeters from the hem and the second one 26 centimeters from the hem. To sew the hook and eye to the vest without showing the stitch on the right side, I'm gonna make a 1 stitch to go through. I'm gonna pierce the fabric with a needle at 90 degrees straight down and then try to pierce it back in the exact same spot. This one stitch is going to keep the lining in place and prevent it from moving around, and then I'll continue to sew the eyelet just to the lining, and then I'm going to move to the other side and repeat the same step. The way to find your placement of your hooks is just simply by trying on the vest and marking where those closures need to be. Typically these hooks are placed one on the widest point of the bust and the second just underneath it. So depending which size are you wearing, those measurements can be different. For the reference, I'm making a UK size 8. I sew them a little bit further so they won't be visible if I'm wearing the vest. It's gonna look like it doesn't have any closures until I decide to use them. And that's it, that's your Penelope vest. It's super nice, I love this project, fun to make, and I hope you like it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!